Hello everybody, I'm Nate Coulter, the Director of the Central Arkansas Library System, and we are reinvigorating a podcast we've had at the library for a while now called Primary Sources. And in this podcast we hope to find people who are prominent, maybe some who are not as prominent in Arkansas, who have interesting stories to tell, who have insight into current events or topics of interest to the community, and we can make those available through our platform. And so that's what we're doing today. I have with me today the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Arkansas, Mike Preston, who for some of us is still known as the head of the AEDC, which I'm old enough to remember when it was the AIDC. And I have friends. Dale Boyette was the director of that. He and I grew up in Nashville, Arkansas. He's a little older than I am, but Dale's a friend. And then I think we have a board member currently, the city of Little Rock appointed Esperanza Masana to be on our board. I think she works at AEDC.
She does, yes.
How many people are at AEDC now?
At AEDC, we're about 100, but when you bring in the entire Department of Commerce, it's 1,500, and a large part of that is our Department of Workforce Services.
Well, tell us about that in a minute, but I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about your background. I know you came here from Florida where you've been involved in economic development, but you've been here since 2015, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your background.
So I came here in April of 2015, so 7 years, a little over now, and from Florida, and grew up there and went to college in Florida, worked in the political world in Florida for a number of years. And
you're a Gator.
I am a Gator.
Of Florida.
Yeah, University of Florida. My wife and I both are, and though I actually grew up in Gainesville, so I've got ties there. My folks are still in the area. My wife's from Fort Myers, and we moved to Little Rock from St. Petersburg, Florida, but lived in Tallahassee and kind of all around a little bit. So we're very familiar with the entire state of Florida, but was in the political realm for a while there in Florida, actually when I was still in school, and started working in the political side, and worked for a state house member who went on to be Speaker of the House and then became Chief of Staff for a senator. The senator I worked for, we were largely North Florida, so kind of more of a rural part of the state that didn't have the big impact that Miami has in the financial sector there, or the trade or tourism that they see. So he had to be more aggressive in economic development. So I started working really closely with the local economic development organizations and chambers of commerce in the kind of the North Florida area, where we were competing with Georgia and Alabama and the states just to the north of us, and really enjoyed economic development, saw the work that they did, and wanted to be helpful in the legislature to do that. So worked with them to pass legislation, helped them on funding issues, and enjoyed it, and saw I saw what, growing up in a small town, when you brought in a big project, what the impact that had to that community, or conversely, if you lost a company and they closed down, and what impact that negatively had on it. So in economic development role, you can kind of help the good and stave off the bad, if you will. So really enjoyed it, engaged in it. The state's economic development organization had an opening at one point and offered me a position. So I took it and hit the ground running, and it was with Enterprise Florida, which would be the equivalent to AEDC in the state of Florida. It's structured a little bit differently, but worked under a couple of leaders there, and went through the Great Recession in Florida. I mean, we hit 12% unemployment, and then we got things turned around real quickly, and had a really strong run there. And right after Governor Scott got reelected, my boss, who was Secretary of Commerce in Florida, left to go into the private sector, and just so happened about the same time I got a phone call from a headhunter who was looking for to fill a position in Arkansas. So he called me and said, "Would you be interested?" And sure, why not? So had never been to Arkansas.
What did your wife say about when you came and said, "I might be moving to Arkansas"?
Well, we had only been married about 2 months at the time, so I realized in the young marriage, I need to ask my wife if she's okay with this. So first thing she said, "Well, show me where that's at on a map."
Where is Arkansas? Yes.
So once we figured that out, she said, "Oh, well, sure, let's try," not knowing if I'd get it. So literally about a week later, I was coming to Little Rock for the first time, and first time the state was to interview with the governor for the position. And a few days later, he called and offered it to me. So we thought and prayed about it and made our decision, and here we are. So
we're glad you're here. And
fortunate.
Most people in Arkansas would say that Arkansas is similar to those parts of Florida where you were working in competition with Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi.
Yeah, to me it wasn't a really big change from where I grew up. And I was like, oh, it must be so different. It's like, no, not really. It reminds me a lot of where I grew up. And, my wife and I have been here, like I said, 7 years now. We truly love the state. We've made some, just great friendships. Our family's still in Florida, but we feel like we just have a new family here in Arkansas. Not that we don't still have our family in Florida; they're all still there and love them dearly. But we just got a new group of friends who we consider family and have been close to so many. And like I said, we were young in our marriage when we came here, so we were fortunate in the time that we're here to have a son of our own. So I like to say the two Floridians came together and we made an Arkansan. So
Pierce is born in Arkansas.
Born in Arkansas, yes, and he was watching the Razorback game the other night when they were playing Gonzaga, and he was with the governor and a group of us, and governor kept telling him to call the Hogs, and he kept doing it. So I think that people enjoyed seeing my son call the Hogs. It's been special.
If he can master that, it's probably harder than the Gator Chomp or something, I guess. Gator Chomp.
He can do that too. I've made sure of that.
So tell us sort of broadly what you do. What's a day in the life of the Secretary of Commerce in Arkansas consist of?
Goodness, economic development is my passion. I love to spend all my time on that. Obviously, with being Commerce Secretary, I have to divide it a little bit more equally now. So a lot of my day is dealing with the 9 various departments that fall within Commerce now. So I try to dedicate as much time as I can to working and interacting with those division directors. But really, I love, I feel if I'm sitting in Little Rock and sitting in my office, I'm not getting the job done. I need to be out on the road selling Arkansas. And that's really, the job of the state's economic development director is to promote our state, work these deals so that you can get these companies to come into our state. So, I'd say that no 2 days are really the same in my job. I will say more so now I have to dedicate a certain amount of time to being in the office and working with all those other divisions and making sure we're doing everything we need to. But every other day, it's hopefully I'm in a community talking to them about developing a site or meeting with a company who's come in to show them a site or show them a building, and we're talking about negotiating an incentive deal with a company, or really I'm out of state meeting with the CEO of a company, convincing them to come take a look at Arkansas, meeting with a site selection consultant, trying to bring them into our state, or a lot of times we end up outside of our country doing the same thing.
And I guess one of the things you have to contend with is that Arkansas is, not in terms of population, but it's a large geographical territory, and some of the issues, economic development issues, are different in some parts of the state. One of the issues that's concerning to a good friend of mine, Rex Nelson, who writes a column in the Democrat Gazette regularly, is that so many counties in Arkansas lost population in the last two censuses. Outside of Jonesboro and that Paragould corridor, and then Central Arkansas, and then the Northwest Arkansas corridor, you've got mostly population decline. You've had a lot of manufacturing jobs leave those areas. How do you work all that together, and do you find it's sometimes hard to balance the different set of variables and challenges from one region of the state to the other?
Well, you just have to, be respectful and be mindful of it. What works in Northwest Arkansas is not going to necessarily work in South Arkansas, and what works in Central isn't going to work in the Delta. So you just need to know the region that you're in and what the strengths that you're selling to. Now, collectively as a whole, in 2021, Arkansas was the #1 state in terms of percentage of inbound movers. So more people moved into Arkansas than moved out of Arkansas than any other state. So, volume-wise, more people moved to Texas or Florida, but percentage-wise of those moving in versus moving out, Arkansas was #1. And that speaks to people aren't actually leaving the state, they're staying in the state, and we're actually seeing people move in. Now, as you said, and my friend Rex will point out too, that it's Northwest Arkansas, it's Central Arkansas, and over in parts Northeast, and the other ones are shrinking. So, while it is something we're proud about in terms of the people moving in, we still have to be mindful for those smaller rural communities who don't have it as good and are losing population. So to them, a win is getting a new grocery store or a new restaurant. It's not a $400 million project bringing in 500 jobs, which is, that'd be a big deal in Central Arkansas. It might not be a big deal in South Arkansas. So just knowing that what the strengths and weaknesses are of each area. So it does take a lot of understanding of the state. For me, I'd say I'm glad that the capital is the center part of the state, because I can wake up in the morning and typically get anywhere I need to in the state, and usually be back home late that night. So it's nice to have that. But the challenges and opportunities are different across the state, and you just got to be respectful of that.
One of the things the library has tried to support in the economic development ecosystem is working to find means of support and mentors and sometimes a little capital in terms of third parties for entrepreneurs. We have a partnership with advancing Black entrepreneurship in something we call the Rocket Lab next door on our campus. And one of the things that Benito likes to say is that they're trying to democratize entrepreneurship and democratize access to the tools that people need to start businesses. And I guess the reason I think of that now is it seems like in a lot of these smaller communities that have been hard hit, and I think you said that part of your job is to stave off the bad, that a lot of times some of the answer may be in creating and growing these small businesses that people have an idea and they're still working their job, but they've got an idea and they just need a little bit of help and encouragement. How are y'all involved in that kind of work?
Well, we are, and the spirit of entrepreneurism runs deep in Arkansas. Part of why we're so successful is we've had great entrepreneurs. You start with Sam Walton and what he built in Walmart, or the Tyson family or the Hunt family, and you can come down to Central Arkansas and look at the Stevens, or Charles Morgan, what he built in an Axiom. Entrepreneurs are throughout our state, and it's important to be able to support that. We actually went as far in economic development to actually create a division of small business and entrepreneurship to really help foster just those ideas for that person who maybe has another job but wants to work on this idea that they have, that how do I bring this to fruition and put together a business plan and take this to some type of commercialization. So we have a division solely dedicated to that, and a lot of it is just connecting the dots, introducing them to maybe what the library system has, or introducing them to an entrepreneurial support organization in their region so that they can be a mentor, or getting them into one of our accelerator programs that we partner with, like the Venture Center or the Northwest Arkansas Council on. So there's a lot of just different areas out there. We wanted to make sure that people that had kind of one point of contact to say, here's what I'm doing, here's what I need help with, and then our team can say, all right, great idea, let me introduce you to this person, this person, this person, and here are the programs, whether it be through TTAG that we were talking about earlier, or something else that we can help facilitate to get your business off the ground. Because really that's where we're going to see a tremendous amount of our growth in our state is going to be those small businesses who open up, they take a chance, and hopefully they succeed and they hire people, and then they become cash flow positive, and then they're tax-paying corporations, and they hire more people. So the rising tide lifts all boats there.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit of being a small state in terms of population and maybe some of these counties, the marginal impact can be greater even with smaller increments of job production or job creation. So if you had 5 jobs because somebody's good idea becomes a real small business in Smackover or Prescott, you've done something significant.
That's right. Yeah, 10 jobs in Eudora is like 200 jobs here in Little Rock. So anytime that we can help that small business open up or grow a little bit, it's impactful.
Well, let's talk about some of the bigger things that I think are more futuristic in some ways. I guess Canoe has located or is planning to locate in Northwest Arkansas. Maybe they're already there.
They are.
Biotech is going to build some electric cars. And I offer that as a sort of segue to the Governor's Council on Future Mobility. You're involved in that. Tell us what that is, and I guess that was created, or the governor announced it in February maybe, so it's new. Tell us about that.
It is new, and the governor, he's great at thinking about what's coming next and what do we need to be ready for. Arkansas has always led in transportation and logistics, but we realize if we want to continue to lead in transportation and logistics, it's got to be more about smart mobility. It's what are we doing in the area of electric vehicles? What are we doing to work on autonomous vehicles and the smart grid systems, drone deliveries? I mean, we saw the world change more in the 2 years of COVID and technology than we have, in the previous 20 years. And I believe that's going to just accelerate here going forward. So we want to make sure that, from a regulatory standpoint, Arkansas is doing all that we can. We were forward to thinking enough in 2019 to pass legislation, thanks to the General Assembly, that allowed for testing of autonomous vehicles on our roadways. That allowed Walmart to partner with a company called Gatic to actually do autonomous deliveries for Walmart. Because we passed that legislation, it was in place, they actually are now doing it. So you actually have the first autonomous delivery trucks going from distribution to warehouse for Walmart, and it's done right here in Arkansas.
What's that look like on the road?
I have not actually seen it on the road myself, but that was part of why we want to do this Future Mobility Summit. We want people to be prepared, because all of a sudden you look over and you see a truck driving down the road.
It can be startling.
It can be. Or a car driving with no, people need to get ready that this is going to be coming.
Has the driver passed out in full floorboard, or is that an autonomous vehicle?
That's the question that people are going to be asking as they see it.
There's not like some way we can identify it as it's coming at us or passing it on the freeway.
Yeah, just know that there's probably a good chance today, if you see that, you know what, it's purposely meant for no driver to be in there. But because we passed that legislation, we were one of the first states that are able to do that. We actually went to Israel back in November of 21, a short window between Delta and Omicron where we could travel for a little while, and they wanted to learn from us. It was great to see. Normally we're going over to Israel to talk about their technology and bring companies in. They wanted to learn what we did from a regulatory environment to be able to do that. And Gatik is originally an Israeli company, so it was a great partnership there with Walmart. But what we realized is that that's just scratching the surface of it. So that's one regulatory on a truck. But what about last mile delivery? What about vehicles? So the future is right now. We were in with a company called Waymo last week in California. It's under the Google umbrella, and they're doing autonomous, basically Uber. So you pull up an app on your phone and order a car. 5 minutes later, a car pulls up. There's no one in it. There's no one driving it, but you get in and you put in your address where you're going and it takes you there. So it's being tested now in San Francisco and Phoenix. So it works, and that's going to be the future of doing it. It's just a matter of what states can compete in that. So the idea on the Future Mobility Council is, let's figure out what regulatory hurdles we have in place, because there's laws that say, you have to be behind a steering wheel in order to drive a car, and you have to do certain things to drive a truck. And then on drone delivery, and that's another one that we're already working on in Northwest Arkansas and Pea Ridge. They're delivering medicine off the roof of a Walmart. They launch the drones, and it's a predetermined route, and it drops the medicine to a remote location, turns back around, and flies back to that roof of the Walmart. But
does the end user pick it up at the remote location?
Well, it's dropped at their doorstep, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's in the neighborhood, or it's at the house.
It drops in, right there on their front door. It's down to that accuracy. We met with another company who's doing similar. They're more on, less on the medicine side and just, goods, delivering food. It's almost like an Uber Eats through the air. You order a cup of coffee and it can deliver it on your doorstep 10 minutes later, and it's still hot, and somehow it hasn't spilled. But there's all kind of regulatory hurdles, as you can imagine, with the FAA and others.
Airports,
you can't get within this flight pass. Normally, most of them are lower than a typical, commercial flight would be. But still, there's regulatory hurdles. So one, we want to have the framework in place that we've paved the way regulatory. But then, what are we doing incentive-wise to look for these new jobs of the future? How are we incentivizing those jobs to come here as opposed to New York or California or Texas or somewhere else? And then what curriculum do we need in place to train a workforce to be ready for those type of jobs? So those are really the big focus of this council.
One of the things you're talking about, incentivizing job creation in the future of mobility. I have an electric car. I was sort of an early adopter, I guess. I got a Chevrolet Volt in 2011. I now have a Model 3 Tesla that I've had 3 years, and I was disappointed when the legislature imposed the $200 fee for licensing renewal every year. There ought to be a more equitable way to assess the upkeep of our highways on EV users. Is it possible that the commission can address that? Because I know when it happened, that was an outlier. We're one of the highest in the country.
Right.
And we already have so few electric vehicles, like maybe 4,000. I read in the Democrat Gazette article a year or so ago. We just have a negligible number of electric vehicles, and that's not creating an incentive for people to have them.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we want to help try to define too. Is, all right, what incentives do we have to encourage people to go this route when they're purchasing a vehicle? But then also, like you said, we're so low in terms of the number of EVs. We don't have the charging infrastructure for charging stations, and until we have that readily accessible and available, it's going to be that much harder, because people they want convenience.
Right.
So we need to make it more convenient. There's a lot of federal funds that are flowing right now to support that. So it's another thing that the council is going to look at. What are the federal funds that we need to tap into to help build out that charging infrastructure? But then also, what are the offsets as we go further and it shifts to, more electric vehicles, we're getting the gas vehicles off and we're losing those tax revenues, how do we make up for that? And, what's where's the sweet spot and what do we need to do regulatory wise? So those are some of the recommendations that we hope to make coming out of this council.
There's an economic development part of that too, in terms of those charging stations. I drove my car to Dallas a couple of weeks ago to see a friend and to catch a plane. I could do both and save a little money on the airport. Don't tell Brian at the airport that I went to the DFW. But there were a couple of stations you have to stop for 20 minutes at the supercharging stations. Yeah. And one of the things I noticed at one of the way stations, the two you stop in, one's in Texarkana, one's in Sulphur Springs, Texas. I'd never been to Sulphur Springs. Okay. It's off the highway.
Yeah.
Town of about 15,000 people. But clearly it has a trail of people in electric cars coming to this bank of charging stations, maybe a dozen of them. And everybody there gets out, they walk over to some place for a restroom, and there are little shops and restaurants and bars, places to get a sandwich that line the main street between the charging station that Tesla has built and the courthouse square in the small town. So it seems like a lot of communities might be interested if they can get some assistance with funding a charging station location, because it will attract cars off the highway. The Sulphur Springs stop was considerably, it wasn't, you couldn't see it off the freeway. The one in Texarkana is right by, just on the Texas side, right by the freeway. You can see the freeway. But in Sulphur Springs, it was several miles into the town, but all these cars are going there because that's the one 100 miles east of Dallas and 100 and something miles west of Texarkana. So there's a lot of incentive to get off. So if we could have more of those in Arkansas, it might also be helpful to some small towns for their economic development.
Well, it is. It's tourism, it's economic development, because if you can get one in a small town, then you have, as you said, either someone coming off the highway purposely going there, or if they wanted to go there, maybe, previously they'd always wanted to take a trip to Mountain Home, Arkansas, but knew they couldn't drive their car there because there was no charging stations. All of a sudden you put that there, or put it in the state park at Mount Magazine or somewhere, then people have a reason to go and say, you know what, I can charge my car while I'm there. So you really, it's twofold. You can capture that traffic coming off the interstates, and we got, we're right through Main Street. America runs right through Arkansas, and then you got north-south access points as well. So we have a lot of traffic coming through our state. We can capture that, but then also we just we're a great state for tourism. People want to come here. We don't want to have any impediments that say we're just going to write off anyone who has electric vehicle from driving into the state and staying because we don't have the charging station infrastructure. We need to have that in our state.
Well, I guess as Ford's making a electric pickup, it's going to become a lot less stigmatizing maybe to own an electric vehicle. Won't be all pointy-headed librarians like you who have EVs. But I'd never been to Sulphur Springs and would probably never have gone to Sulphur Springs, Texas in my life, but for the fact that there was a charging station I needed to hook up to.
Well, I'm sure you spent some money while you were there.
I bought a cheeseburger.
Okay.
Right. That's what, and there are a lot of me doing that. So a lot of folks like me doing that. So how many times, I know there's a report due in November, what's the process of the commission? Will there be public meetings? How many times will y'all gather? And
we're going to actually gather first time publicly as a group on this coming Monday. So here, April 10th, I guess that would be. We'll be getting together for the first time as a group, aside from the initial kickoff meeting that we have with the governor. But there's been dialogue and work going on with the governor's office, and we're researching statutes and things to look at. So the staff will have that to put in front of the council members when they get together on Monday. And as I said, we were in California last week, and the governor, myself, and Cyrus Sagari, who's the chair of the council, who he splits time between California and Northwest Arkansas. He joined us for some of those meetings that I was talking about relating to smart mobility out there on drone delivery and autonomous vehicles. So we've already starting to have those conversations. We have a good, clear path that we know what we need to figure out. We know what needs to go in the report. Now it's a matter of this group getting together. And I suspect we'll probably get together at least monthly, if not more frequently, as it gets closer to that November 30th deadline.
Is there a way for the public to follow this? Is there a website, or is there a social media platform? What can people do who are interested in that and want to keep up with it?
Yeah, we'll probably put out press releases and media advisories as we meet. I don't think we've set up a landing page yet for a website. What we'll probably do is just embed it within the AEDC website. So anyone interested, go to the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. We'll keep everyone updated and posted on that through our website, so we don't have to go create out and buy a whole new other website. But we've got capacity on ours that we could add it into it.
Are the meetings at Big Mac, or where will they be? Your building?
We're going to be all around the state, actually. Okay. The first one's going to be in Northwest Arkansas. Okay. And we'll have virtual options for people too. Who can't. So I actually can't make it up to Northwest on Monday. I've got stuff here in Little Rock, so I'll be virtual on the meeting. But we'll move them around the state, because it is a statewide. It's not just a Central or Northwest. So we try to want to get around the state and so we can hear input from the public as well.
Well, thanks for doing that, and thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today.
We'll put it out and hope people will follow and keep up. It's important. I have one last question.
Yeah.
I noticed one of the types of future mobility were cars that travel by air.
Believe it or not, the Jetsons are here. It is. There are flying cars.
Are you old enough to remember the Jetsons? Maybe in reruns.
Vaguely, I saw them as a kid. But there are the prototypes out there of vehicles that the wings fold in and you drive them from your house to a runway, and all of a sudden you get to the runway and you pop out the wings. The next thing you know, you're taking off. So I've seen them. They work. There are prototypes out there. They're just a matter of finding the market, and are people ready to spend that amount of money? Again, another more regulatory hurdles, to have a car that can, is compliant with all the safety standards to drive on the road, but then is FAA compliant to pop out wings and get up in the air.
So I assume DMV won't be, you won't just need a DMV license.
Yeah, it might be a little bit more. So those are things that we're looking at, but those companies are out there and they exist right now.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yes.
Enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.